Hi, I'm Wright. I lead Americas for MSX. Jason?
Hi, Jason Stein, CEO of Flat 6 Media.
I'm Andrea Sorrent, the Chief Operating Officer of MSX.
We're here today to talk about EV, as we've seen COVID change the customer's expectations around the experience, and we're doing things today that we never thought possible. It's going to change even more dramatically over the next 10 years as EV begins to scale. So we're going to have a discussion today to talk about what's it going to take to be competitive in this new market. And first, I'm just going to start out with some high-level facts and figures. You think about today in 2022 in the US, electric vehicles represent about 5% of sales, and Tesla is still 65% of that BEV share. Fast forward just a couple years to 2025, we'll have 3 times as many models. We'll have over 150 models, and Tesla's share is projected to be less than 20%, although they'll still be growing. Fast forward again to 2030, and even very conservative estimates suggest that EV sales will be 30% of total sales in the US. But when you think about that, what that means is we'll have about 26 million EVs on the road. We'll still have 270 million EVs, or ICE vehicles on the road in 2030. So the key question then becomes, how do industry players, the car manufacturers, the dealers, how do they adapt to this change to thrive in the new environment? And Jason, with your breadth of relationships and your expertise across this industry, what are you seeing?
What I'm seeing is that there's not necessarily the panic button being pushed that there was maybe a year or two ago when some of these proclamations came out that EVs were going to take over the world, and that you've got to tear up all your plans in your dealer space. There's a lot more, I would say, Rod, a sense of realism that exists now. And the realism is focused on the fact that this will take time, and this is it's a transition that's taking place. And the analogy that's been shared with a number of people with me, and I think is appropriate here, is that back 100 years ago or 120 years ago, when there were horses and there were, by the way, electric vehicles, because 1914 was around the era when electric vehicles were thought to be the next iteration of the car, along with steam, of course, and gasoline. Well, there were no gas stations on every corner. There were no dealers and fixed operations that had been set up already. But what happened was, it was an evolution. It's an evolutionary stage. And yeah, while those predictions could be in the realm of realism, the bottom line is that we sit here and we don't quite know exactly how fast it's going to change, what consumer adoption will be, what the infrastructure issues will ultimately be from an obstacle standpoint, and how dealers and manufacturers will adjust to that reality as consumers buy more EVs, if they buy more EVs the way that some have predicted. So it's all very evolutionary, and I think we do sit, it's funny, there's always this period where we think that the time that we're living in is the most pivotal time. Yeah. And I think we said that 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. There's no question that now is that period, because of the propulsion system that's changing. But ultimately, it's still a propulsion system.
Interesting. So, Andrea, when you think about that propulsion system and you think about the changes that go back 100 years when we set the distribution model, how do you see the US versus other markets that may be ahead of us?
Well, the surprising thing, Rod, is the US has always been a leading market from a retail standpoint, right? But in terms of adoption of EVs, we all know that US is a little bit behind compared to some other markets. In particular, I'm thinking about China and Europe, where the penetration of EVs is a lot higher. There's a number of reasons for that, some of them being related to government incentives, others being related to the environment and the adoption from consumers. I do see that changing rapidly, though. I think the US is catching up quickly. There will still be some constraints from a legal standpoint, which will have to be addressed. We know that there's players out there, the famous disruptors, the Teslas of the world, who are selling directly to customers, but there are other players who have a few more challenges in getting to that direct sales model. It's challenges, but it's also opportunities, right? The traditional manufacturers can rely on huge networks of dealers who have years and years of experience in handling the customer relationships. And I think the question will become, how will we be able to adapt that experience and that customer relationship to the new requirements and new needs of the consumers.
So that's a great point around the direct selling model. And Jim Farley's been quoted as the franchise model has about a $2,000 cost disadvantage to the direct selling model. As you think about how the car makers are going to manage that evolution over the next 5 to 10 years, how are they going to address the cost cap?
Well, there's no question that the cost cap is substantial. When you think about the capex that's involved to develop these vehicles. Look at the average transaction price of vehicles now too. I mean, you're already north of $45,000 on average for an internal combustion engine vehicle, and you're way above that when it comes to the average price of EVs. And then of course you have incentives and you have subsidies that are making that much more affordable. A key point that Andrea made is all around the government assistance to that. So there's the consumer piece of it where it's just more expensive to buy vehicles anyway. But how will they adjust? How do automakers want to move forward? They have been loud and clear in America that every other market around the world has this agency model. We didn't really talk about the agency model much in the last 10 years, but boy, it's come up a lot in the last 10 months. And it is to get cost out of that system. But interesting, Farley's approach and his former employer, Toyota's approach. Toyota says, we're all in with you. We are not going to change this system. In fact, Akio Toyota stood up in Las Vegas this fall at their annual dealer meeting and said, first and foremost, whatever we do, you are at the forefront of what we're going to do here. And I think that some manufacturers, Toyota, will work hand in glove with their partners to try to find solutions that are more palatable from a cost perspective, and others are obviously trying to get cost out of the system. Stellantis has been very vocal. Carlos Tavares has been very vocal about trying to get some of that. He pegs it as $3,000 per vehicle cost, the marketing cost out of the system. But they all have to coexist because we're in America here, and the franchise system is alive and well. It is not the European model. It's not the agency model. But that tension between those two groups has existed since 1914.
Yep.
And so there will be a middle and a medium ground that's achieved, I think, at some stage. But there are a lot of questions around pricing that need to be addressed. And you even look at things like battery degradation and other issues related to the cost of operating EVs, installations at dealerships. There are solutions that need to be uncovered over the course of the next 3, 5, 10 years.
So as you think that as we uncover those solutions, the direct selling model of Tesla and the Rivians and Lucids of the world, as we think about selling still 10 to 12 million units of ICE vehicles a year, will we see the selling experience bifurcate? We'll have an EV selling experience and we'll have an ICE selling experience. Andrea, what is your view on that?
I think what we are observing now is probably not exactly what the market will look like a few years from now for a number of reasons. The first one being that today EVs are still being adopted by the early adopters, so those people who can afford to make an investment and who have specific needs in terms of interaction with the dealerships and with whoever is selling a vehicle to them. I think as we start democratizing EVs and we start democratizing that sales process, and to Jason's point, I mean, we've reached some transaction prices which are really record high right now. As we start moving downstream in the market, we'll have to understand how those customer needs are going to change, right? Again, today we are talking about moving the vast majority of the sales interaction online. There is probably less of a need for the consumer to visit the dealership. But tomorrow, when that expense becomes a much larger portion of the portfolio of a consumer, will they be able to make that decision without actually touching the vehicle and experiencing it with their own hands? Will they trust the online transactional experience? I think these are all things that we will need to overcome with time as we start growing that adoption of EVs. So.
Yeah, one more point on just the affordability factor of it too. There is a section of the buying market that's being boxed out here. And it is that entry level, it would have been an entry level sedan in the past. Good luck finding a sedan these days, right? They're very few. But it's that first car, you're newly married, you're going to buy a first car, or you want a second car for a teenager who's going off to school, things of that nature. Those are really hard to come by these days. There's an affordability crisis because of the pricing of EVs, because of the pricing of ICEs, and I think that's going to have to be addressed in order to even get to the point where you can have a wider adoption, because we factor in interest rates, other macroeconomic issues. It's just becoming a lot harder to find cars that are affordable.
Yeah, and that's been compounded in the last 2 years also by the chip shortage and the inventory shortage in general, right? So we've seen used car prices skyrocket.
Yes.
And that portion of the market that you're talking about has had to turn to used vehicles. But even there, it's been a challenging environment.
Yeah,
So.
and we're starting to see the used vehicle prices come back down and people switching back to new vehicles as there's more availability. But when you think about EV and you think about the price, there's been a lot of press around, especially the traditional OEMs, saying we're going to start to introduce EVs at lower price models to be competitive. But then when it comes time to actually launching them, the prices of the raw materials like lithium and cobalt are through the roof, right? We still have the supply chain issues. Ford just announced their third price increase on the F-150 Lightning this week, right? It's now 40% more expensive than it was when they launched it. So how do you see those longer term supply chain issues? Are those transitory, or will they be a permanent factor for EV adoption?
Well, I think what's happening is automakers are investing in their supply chain in a way that maybe they haven't before because they have to, and a lot of reshoring or inshoring, or pick your term, but you see the plethora of battery plants being produced now. There seems to be an announcement on a weekly basis. So you'll see a lot of that activity increase. I think you'll see the chip shortage issue also have the same kind of momentum to it, because you can't get caught off guard by one plant that's in Southeast Asia that knocks down the every wiper blade system on an F-150. Right. So yeah, that's a way to try to address some of those concerns. So I don't know that I've ever seen a period that has had this kind of velocity around the construction, and obviously there are government incentives around this, but the construction of and the creation of a supply chain that's in North America that's so robust, and it's probably been since the turn of the last century, honestly. So yeah, there are related. There are issues that need to be cleaned up post-COVID, and one of them is just a better supply base to be able to handle some of these concerns should there be a shock to the system again.
I'd be surprised if things don't stabilize over time. I mean, I'm sure that as demand keeps on growing and as the supply chain starts to evolve beyond all the challenges that it's faced over the past couple of years, the chip shortage. Let's not forget the war as well, which has had an impact also. So
Correct.
I think things will definitely stabilize, and that will have a positive impact on the industry, and as well as innovation. Right? We've seen an incredible drop in the cost of batteries over time already, and we expect that to continue. Plus, there's going to be probably some groundbreaking innovations that are going to be coming in the next few years. We talk about solid-state batteries, for example, which is really one of the most groundbreaking probably that's coming in the next few years. So it'll be exciting to see.
So as we see then the stabilization and the prices coming down, then it brings us back to CX, right? And as you think about, Jason, I love your initial comment that at the end of the day, EV is simply a propulsion system, right? It didn't push the CX. It's really, I think, the new entrants with their disruptions model combined with COVID that allowed us to see some fundamental changes. So I want to go through a couple of those and just get you guys rapid fire reactions to a couple of old axioms that I think we prior to COVID thought were true in the industry, and just get your take on these. So the first one is a very broad one, but product is king, right? Customers are loyal to the brand. An F-150 customer is an F-150 customer, right? A Chevy Silverado customer is a Chevy Silverado customer. You're not going to get them switched to another brand. Is that still true?
I think it's still very true, and I think that's why you see this EV war that's broken out, particularly among those two brands that you just said. Towing capacity, payload, I can charge my home if the power grid goes down in my neighborhood. oh, the wedding went on even though the power went out because we just plugged all the lights into the
Yep,
back of the truck.
yep,
I mean,
yep.
those examples that are out
Yep.
there. And yeah, I think product is still very much king, and you're going to have a slugfest with the Detroit car companies trying
Yeah.
to maintain those very loyal buyers.
I think that's absolutely true for a large portion of the market.
Mm-hmm.
There is the early adopter portion of the market where consumers are ready for innovation, and they seem to be more influenced by the experience itself rather than just the product. So you become loyal to an experience rather than just a product if you belong to that segment of the market.
Interesting. So building on that one, the next one is customers want instant gratification. They want to go to the dealership, take delivery that day, and go home. So we need to have 60, 90, 120 days of inventory on the ground to satisfy that need. Is that still true?
Fundamentally changed. I talked to one automaker executive who may be in Detroit, who said that the change that's occurred on build to order would never have occurred had all of this not taken place over the last couple of years. They couldn't have forced the issue to go to more of a build to order, to patience and wait time. And some interesting studies that have been done over the course of the last 6 to 12 months. A survey of Gen X or Gen Y, Gen Z, the propensity or the willingness to wait for a vehicle at 6 to 9 months, not a problem. For more than half of them, no problem, I'll wait. Now, I don't know any Gen Zer who wants to wait for anything, but clearly they're still waiting. They're willing to wait for a vehicle, and we are retraining. And Andrea knows this better than I do, having lived for such a long time in Europe. I had a very short window there, and waiting 6 to 12 months for a vehicle was the way that it was. We didn't ever do it here, but it was in other cultures completely customary. But walking down to the dealer lot and walking out with the keys the same day, I think it's fundamentally changed.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I mean, the European consumer is already used to this, right? In the U.S., it may not be an immediate transition. It may take a little bit for consumers to get used to it, but inevitably, I think that's going to be the way. And it's a way more efficient way to distribute vehicles.
Yeah.
But there may be a point, just to add on to that finally, there's a blinking point that's going to occur on incentives and on inventory. And we're seeing inventory now start to build again.
Sure.
Who is going to be the first one to blink on the automaker side to start putting money on the hood? Because the one thing this industry is full of is ego. And I want to be number one in market share, and I want to be number one in my market. I want to dominate the segment. I think it's all fine and good when nobody had any product, but the minute more folks, more automakers have products, who's number one? The bragging points are real.
Especially in those competitive sectors of the market, right? Those lower end vehicles where you're not willing to pay to wait for months for a standard vehicle where you don't even know, or you're not too keen on having that specific option or having those particular requirements met. You're just looking for 4 wheels for your family to get around.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, right? Because very rarely in any business do you see a time where we can significantly decrease volumes and significantly increase profitability, right? So it'll be a question of who wins that battle. Is it the CFO or is it the sales guy?
Well, and this is the 1980s in America when Toyota and Honda's vehicles got a lot better, and it was a supply problem. It wasn't a demand problem. There just wasn't. There weren't enough vehicles of that those new consumers really wanted to buy, and profitability was off the charts for those dealers because of that. And that's exactly where we are right now. Through the years, it's always been more of a demand problem, and this bouncing up and down of inventory goes up, inventory goes down, and they scale back, they build back up again. And the fact is, this is 40 years ago, but where does it go from here?
Yeah. But that said, some of the manufacturers, or I would say most of the manufacturers, have taken actions to focus more on margins and profit than they have on volume. I mean, you can see that as some of these large companies. Once it was the mantra for all the OEMs was, I need to be everywhere in the world. I need to be selling vehicles everywhere. Well, we've seen in the last few years that some of these OEMs have realized that it's not that important to be in every market. What is important is you do so profitably and that you are competitive in the markets where you play.
Yep.
So I think that's demonstrated that there is a little more attention to making sure that you have a sound business model rather than just satisfying that ego, which is still definitely present, but I think it's not as prevalent as it used to be.
Yeah. The other axiom around pricing is F&I, right? F&I is too complicated to do in e-commerce setting. Plus, customers want to negotiate every last nickel out of the deal. Is that still true?
I think that's still true. It's a changing market now because interest rates aren't what they were, for the last 5 or 10 years. So the negotiating position is probably a little larger than it was before. But I would agree that I don't know that that's really changed very much.
I do see customers wanting to, avoid the haggling piece of it. So there may still, you're always looking for the most convenient offer, right? So you're still going to be looking for that. But I think if the manufacturers manage to establish a policy where there can be a price that is the same for all, and I realize that's extremely difficult with the current environment, but I think if they manage to do that, that would be a positive step in the eyes of the consumer. You eliminate that level of uncertainty, right?
Yeah, there's more transparency now than there ever was before, and we just, what for all of its pitfalls, I mean, what Carvana has done over the course of the last 2 years has really changed that whole consumer experience, not only on pricing but on other aspects and delivery and ease of use. Even Tesla, I mean, relatively speaking, you can get a transaction done with great ease through the Tesla app and put a credit card down, make a deposit, order your car. Consumer experience maybe, or satisfaction may be a different story. And the one issue that I've always said with Tesla is it's sort of like dating somebody who's really attractive but who treats you really poorly. And that can be the experience in some cases. But
yeah, so that leads to another axiom, which is we have to give everyone a test drive because they won't buy the car without a test drive. Carvana has shown that you can have a return model, right? So where does the test drive stand now?
Well, once again, I think it comes down to the various segments of the market, right? If you have a young family, you need a vehicle that satisfies specific needs. You need to drive your family for a few miles around or go on vacation with the vehicle. You probably want to feel that out, and you want to know what it's like, and if it can satisfy those specific needs. If you're an early adopter, you're the Tesla buyer from 3-4 years ago, you don't really care about test driving it. You want that object, you know what it's like, and you're going to buy it no matter what. So I think the test drive becomes less important in that case.
I just think dealers have gotten a lot better at all aspects of the buying process, including the test drive experience. COVID forced, obviously, shutdowns and then reopenings of stores in certain states, and just different ways of doing business, meeting the consumer where they are, and look at the marketing and advertising that's out there now. It's all really focused around, we're here for you, we're going to take care of you, we're part of your community, and we're going to make this as easy as we possibly can for you. And I would venture to say that even the old notion of what a dealership was and how they treated people is starting to really dissipate. It's certainly not your father's dealership.
Great point. So that leads me to the last axiom, which is you think about the car manufacturers starting to push a lot on these direct selling experiences and trying to create OEM branded experiences. One of the old axioms we've had is that factory people don't understand retail. Dealers understand retail. Are we going to see that shift at all?
I don't know that, given the long history of the two groups, as I mentioned earlier, who just don't kind of coexist very well. I think there are some brands who do it exceptionally well and others who don't do it so well at all. But the two groups have to coexist in this new environment because the consumer does come first. Yes, product is king, but the consumer is also king. And with so many options now, and if you revert back to the EV case, Tesla had its own little world for a certain period of time. And all those models that you mentioned, Rod, that are on the way, that are here, frankly, is going to drive a lot more business back to franchise dealers and automaker plans that are very aggressive in terms of flipping over completely to EVs. There has to be a better coordination between the OEM and their franchise dealers in order to make sure that the consumer is satisfied, because there are a lot of options now, a lot of choices, and all those other direct selling options, Lucid, Rivian, and the like.
So then you get to the need for coordination, but the largest dealer groups are all on record as trying to go national with their brands, right? And they're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in creating that national brand with the national infrastructure. Will that create different tiers of dealers, those that can operate in front of the OEM brands and those that are still beholden on the OEM? What do you think, Andrea?
I think the consistency in the consumer experience, we were talking about loyalty earlier, right? Is loyalty to the product or is loyalty to the experience? I think as the loyalty moves more towards the experience, you will need to look for consistency, and that will be an asset for the OEMs. Frankly, if they do the right thing and they move in the right direction and they're able to establish a customer journey that is really satisfactory, then I think that will definitely be an advantage for them. There's no doubt that some of the large dealer groups will be able to do the same. So I think the consumer is out there for the taking, and if you manage to create that experience and create a leading experience, I think you will win in this market.
I think it's all about economies of scale. That's why you're seeing that develop. The amount of investment that's going to be required at the dealership level to accommodate the technology that's coming in, to make the service bays wider, to increase the charging power and the grid that goes into the dealership itself. To your earlier question, it will create different tiers, because I think your rural dealer single point may have some challenges as it relates to that capital investment that's required in order to meet the technology that's coming. And that's why you see Lithia and Asbury and AutoNation Group 1 on the buying spree that they're on, because it's all about economies of scale, and also, of course, a play to the market, because they obviously, as publicly traded, they have to continually show innovation. But it's definitely about the amount of investment that's needed going forward, and about the economies of scale that they can get. Everything with the back office, what AutoNation did when they first bought some of those Florida stores back 20, 30 years ago. So,
good.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think the other side of that coin is after sales. Today, most of these dealers are making a lot of their money in after sales and parts. And inevitably, you said at the beginning, in 10 years, if EVs continue down this evolutionary track, there will still be 270 million ICE vehicles on the road. That's probably going to be the target for the smaller dealers, because I don't think they'll be able to evolve as quickly as the large-scale dealers. But there will be a shift, and I think the large dealers are the ones that are going to be able to meet the demand of the more modern EV vehicles more easily.
So as you think about the ownership experience, right, you see the direct sellers, Tesla, they don't have the network, right? So they're trying to set a CX expectation of the maintenance-free car, right? You hear the traditional manufacturers say, no, it's all about the network, right? So we've got your back once you take delivery of that vehicle if there's any issues. If you're a direct seller, a Tesla, Rivian, et cetera, what do you do the day after the sale, right? How do you create the appearance of that network in a way that's cost effective?
The appearance of the network, I would ask the question, do they care? I'm not exactly sure that they care as much as traditional OEMs do. I think it is all about the experience of owning the product, the ease of experience in buying. But there haven't been many examples of my example that I referenced earlier of the follow-up, of the care, and you see it in some of the J.D. Power rankings or things like that, where customer satisfaction, in the 90-day or 1 year period is so low. I mean, if I think about Tesla, I think Elon Musk is too distracted by other things right now to worry about whether his customers come back to a network that's been created.
But inevitably, as the numbers start going up, and as you start having units in circulation that grow for EVs, they will need to think about it. What we see is the most obvious evolution is towards mobile service, right? Where you get your vehicle serviced at your home or at a convenient location for you. I can talk to you about my own personal experience recently when I had my tires changed on my driveway. And I was blown away by the convenience of it. I was sitting at home, I was working, I barely even had to walk out to say hi to the gentleman that was doing the work, and it was done well and in no time and no disruption to my workday. So as we move towards a world that is more direct to consumer, these are the kinds of things that are really going to be important for having success.
And those are popping up all over the place. There are a number of technology companies launched just in the last year that do a lot of consumer facing, consumer convenience business models that they're rolling out. I mean, there's another example of a recent startup that will bring a unit to your driveway and will wash your car for you without a drop of water hitting the ground. So you don't have to go to the dealership to make that happen. My guess is, if you want to get your car serviced and everything else, my guess is that those services are going to roll out. That kind of technology will be absorbed by the dealer network, applied to consumers to make the ease of use just so much better and faster.
So if you think then about the dealers as they absorb those technologies, today with the ICE vehicles, parts and service is about half their profitability, right? And with EVs needing less frequent repairs, fewer parts, we can use over-the-air updates more often. Will those sorts of services be enough to compensate for the fall in profitability they see?
Well, some studies, one that's by We Predict, which looks at the 3 to 5 year window of owning electric or plug-in hybrids, and what that the impact of that to the service lane. What they have discovered is that, yeah, in some cases there's a decrease in the amount of revenue generated through EVs or plug-in hybrids. In other cases, there's an increase. Labor hours is an example, and that those ICE versus EV fixed ops comparisons are proving to be pretty net neutral at this point.
Yeah, I think that's in this stage. I think that's to be expected. I think what will happen over time is inevitably the cost of owning an EV is gonna go down. The service associated with EVs is definitely going to be lower. But in order to get there, there will be a need for significant investment, both on behalf of the OEMs and the dealers. And that's where scale is going to be extremely important, like Jason was saying.
And there are basic parts too, like brakes and windshield wipers and all, I mean, and then it'll be electric motors,
tires,
and all kinds of other things that just need to be replaced generally.
But you need to get there. I mean, today the technician that's operating on a vehicle is used to taking it apart and changing some components or disassembling them and fixing them. Tomorrow, you're going to be dealing with high voltage. You're going to be dealing with very heavy batteries. So you will need the equipment and the capabilities in the dealership to be able to address that issue. So the transition is going to be a little bumpy initially. It's going to require significant investment, but then over time, again, it's probably going to slow down.
So dealers now who are doing extremely well, as we've seen in the last couple of years on the profitability side, should invest now and realize that if we take just the fixed ops area, that's going to change over from a technical standpoint, from a labor standpoint as well. And the amount of expertise that's going to be required in the back shop area, back part of the store, is going to be very different than what it is today. But now's the time to invest because of all of those record years that everybody kind of forgets that there is a downside to the roller coaster.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll say that investment needs to also be reflected on the front side of the store, where some of the studies that we're seeing are saying that the personnel at the dealership is not necessarily promoting EVs, is not a fan of EVs, and is not driving those sales. So we probably need to consider that investment as well. It's really important. They need to understand what it means to own an EV, and the consumer today needs a lot more information as they're buying a new product that they're not used to, that has different requirements from the ICE vehicle that they were driving until yesterday.
A study done by ISPOS actually went to major markets across North America to see just how equipped the front of the store was. And it's, to your point, woefully equipped to handle the EV questions. Where can I charge it? How long will it last? What is the battery degradation? How do I get it fixed? I mean, this litany of questions that the salesperson just couldn't answer. So investing means not only the technical investing, but it also means investing in how you
The
sell.
people. Yep. So now let's think about the day-to-day engagement with the vehicle, right? Because as we think about the new vehicle acquisition and we think about the repair side, there's also new connected features becoming available with 5G connectivity becoming more and more prevalent within the vehicles, with vehicle as a wallet technology. Who's going to benefit most from those sorts of services that are going to be envisioned as part of this evolution as well? Is that going to be more an opportunity for the manufacturers to build direct revenue models, or will the dealers have a chance to participate in that?
I think it's really up for grabs right now. The manufacturers certainly see the opportunity, and they're investing a lot in that space. But there's new entrants also. I mean, the Apples of the world, the Googles of the world, they will not just sit there. I mean, there's a huge opportunity to monetize the experience of the consumer in that space. I think what will be interesting is to see how dealers can connect into that space, right? Because as you move more towards that direct connectivity, it's clear that the connection with the customer will move more towards the manufacturer rather than the dealer. So
it's not just a question of car maker versus dealer, it's car maker, dealer, or technology company,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Or fintech company.
Yes.
Right? So.
Well, and the conversations get interesting when the manufacturer is going to ask you for X amount to either boost your horsepower in your vehicle or to keep your heated seats turned on. That becomes a very different conversation. And where's the dealer in that conversation? Exactly. Are they caught in the middle? Are they on the other side? I don't know what's going on here.
And how ready is the consumer? Because you know, you buy a Tesla today with a significant premium. You can buy your autopilot, your full autopilot, which is not active yet, right? So how ready is the consumer to spend that extra money? Once you own the vehicle already, you have to spend some extra money for your subscriptions and to get that extra functionality.
Right. And then you think about the F&I side, right? Where if as we start to move those features away from the initial transaction, we lower the initial transaction outlay, so the F&I model is a little bit different then as well. And that's another significant source of profitability for retailers.
But Rod, I think what's going to drive that, like we were talking about before, is convenience for the consumer. Ultimately, if you're a manufacturer or you're this third-party company, this technology provider, you can try to generate new revenue streams, but ultimately it's going to be the consumer to decide whether that's going to work or not. And so again, we're going to learn over time what it is that people are ready to spend that extra buck on, and what it is that they expect to be included in their vehicle.
Good. So as we move beyond purchasing and servicing the vehicles, now we've got to talk about the infrastructure that's out there to support EVs, right? Today, there's a lot of discussion that we're not ready. What is your view on that?
I agree. I don't think having a residence that's in a hurricane-prone area, I've experienced this fall some significant power outages. And we're talking about the state of Florida here that doesn't have a small number of people living there. We've also had examples in California and Colorado where both governors have said in the middle of summer when soaring temperatures said, turn off your AC. Okay, what do I do with my car? Right. So I think there's a lot to be sorted out here that's not done yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of the core areas that needs to be addressed in the industry. I think previously it was about range. Now the average range of the vehicle is up to 300 miles or up there, and I think that's plenty. But the problem becomes, where do I recharge it, and how do I recharge it? There's plenty of studies that say that the most reliable network is still Tesla's, whereas the other networks are struggling to stay functional and to be convenient for the consumer, both in terms of location and functionality. So that's really something that we'll have to see. There's even some innovators that are coming into the space. Like we had a podcast a while back with eGap. This is a company that does mobile charging, right? They're having a lot of success in some European countries. So new models are certainly going to start taking off, but the charging infrastructure is really one of the keys to the success of EVs.
Yeah, and one of the key questions remains, do we have an open charging infrastructure? Do we have a closed charging infrastructure, right? Tesla obviously has had the capital to invest in their own proprietary network, a closed network, a la Apple, whereas the other manufacturers are following the Microsoft open architecture play, right?
Absolutely.
Who do you think is going to win?
I have no idea. I think that's probably the cloudiest question that you could ask
Yes.
in this segment. I think it's up for debate. The innovators will win, the
Yes.
entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the one intuitive evolution is that you will have a growing number of EVs on the market. It will be difficult for that one single brand to establish a network as solid as Tesla's over time. So there will inevitably need to be some sort of third-party network that will satisfy the needs. But who knows? I mean, it's.
Yeah. Andrea, you talked earlier about how part of the reason Europe is ahead is the role of the government. What needs to happen here from a governmental perspective to push this innovation forward?
Well, I think we're seeing some push with the current legislation. And I think it's really about, again, creating more convenience. I mean, you want the consumer to be driving that adoption. You don't want it to be mandated only by the government. So if it's more convenient for a consumer to buy an EV, and again, if we can remove that obstacle, which is the charging infrastructure, I think we'll see adoption continue to grow.
Good.
I just want to thank Jason for joining us. It's exciting to hear his point of view. That he's built up over years of being a leader in the automotive space, and now he's meeting and interviewing so many leaders that have so many opinions. I think it's great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, as well.
Thank you.